So it's hard to believe that it's been just over 1 month already since Nissan was kind enough to invite me up to their technical center just outside of Detroit, Michigan, to gather my first driving impressions of the all-new 2025 Nissan Murano, and of course the Armada as well. And this week they're kind enough to send me the Murano Platinum to spend a full week, gather my comprehensive thoughts, impressions, and overall opinions of this vehicle. And just since that event in January, rumors have started swirling that one of the competitive set vehicles, the Chevy Blazer, will be discontinued for the 2026 model year, which leaves the Murano even more in a segment of its own in the two-row SUV space. So over my last week or so, I've certainly learned a lot more about this vehicle, both positive and a few negative attributes as well, added onto that list I started in January at that first driving event. In my regular normal environment, there's things I just wouldn't have noticed with the amount of time that I had at that event that I immediately noticed here in my regular driving environment, day-to-day life. So in this video, we're gonna go over everything I both like and dislike here with the all-new 2025 Nissan Murano Platinum. So as usual, starting out with my list of likes with the Murano, the first one has to be the seats. Now this was something that we actually learned a little bit more about last month. These are the zero gravity seats, which essentially is a certification that Nissan has to go through in terms of pressure points and overall ergonomics of the seat, if you will. Now this one being a Platinum has the most premium leather material on them, several different color combinations that one can choose. This is the black with the dark brown upper section, quilted accent stitching, massaging, heated and ventilated front seats, and of course memory here on the driver's side. The list really goes on. Now, typically with my spinal fusion, it was something I discussed with some of the team members up there last month, is that headrests generally give me a little bit of an issue in terms of pushing my neck or head forward, forcing my visibility down, and I have to compensate by reclining the seat back farther than I would comfortably like. Now here with this seat, I'm happy to say that even though the headrest still isn't maybe ideal in a perfect world, it's much better than average for most other vehicles I've tested here on the channel. And the actual comfort of the seat is second to none out there, I have to say. It is near the top out of every brand or manufacturer I've tested, and I have zero complaints in terms of overall comfort. Now, the way the heated and ventilated seats work, specifically with the automatic function, might not be the best out there in terms of the software and things like that, but the actual material, the actual seat comfort, the padding, the cushioning, even the massaging on the backrest portion is very good in the way it works, and it's just very, very comfortable. So if you're looking at a Murano, specifically here at the Platinum, I have to say I don't think you will find an issue in terms of the overall seat comfort. Now, continuing on from the seats, my second like has to do with the interior in general. A lot of this has to do with the materials, the overall ergonomics, and some of the buttons and switchgear. So starting out here in the door pane, you're gonna find a ton of soft touch premium leather materials, including this brown upper. You have the black armrest, both with accent stitching. You have this unique faux glass, which they told us a little bit more in their presentation, is several layers of vinyl that's meant to reflect or refract light in certain instances to actually mimic that of a glass appearance. The switchgear for the window controls are very high quality. I like the door handle. In terms of the seats, we already mentioned how comfortable and nicely appointed the seats are, including the headrests themselves. And then looking at the dashboard, you can see a lot of those soft touch materials across the dash, the hood for the gauge cluster, everything like that just looks very, very nice. Now, stepping inside even further, I will go ahead and overlay some nighttime or evening footage. The ambient lighting across the dashboard, into the door panels, and down in the center console area even makes it more of a premium experience in the amount of customization that you can actually tune on the infotainment system. The steering wheel material and the padding and just the amount of soft touch it has to be one of the best, most premium feeling and hand steering wheels I have ever noticed. I like the flat bottom D shape here. Don't love the buttons, but we will be touching on that in a little bit. But overall, I just think the interior is well laid out. The materials are top notch, especially for the low $50,000 price point, which this vehicle comes in at. Outside of some gloss black and some of the buttons here in the center console, I think Nissan did a very good job, bringing the entire interior together and certainly using the materials and appointments that they did. Now, I guess continuing on with the interior, my third like has to do specifically with that ambient interior lighting that goes across the dashboard and onto all four door handles, including here in the center console. Now, some of the customization that you can do here in the infotainment system, if you simply go into vehicle, interior light, ambient lighting, this brings up the full menu and customization that you can do with the ambient lighting. Now, immediately you can see you can do front and rear, turn those on and off separately and independently, which is very nice. And then below that, you have all the different, I guess, pre-made modes with different colors in them. You can tweak the brightness of the ambient lighting. And then at the very bottom, you can tune your own color and again, just the actual brightness of the ambient lights themselves. But the ProPilot Assist mode is a very cool mode because it actually integrates with some of the driver assistance and safety technologies inside this vehicle. Is a default white, and then we'll go ahead and change color depending on what is going on with that driver assistance technology. So overall, I like the ambient lighting. I think it's very well implemented inside the vehicle itself. It's very visible, more visible than that of some other recent vehicles I've been in. I like the fact that you can turn the front and rear on independently. I will say you probably will need to dim down the brightness depending on what color and your overall impressions of the vehicle, because it can get quite bright at night, especially in the white color. Overall, I just like the design of the ambient light, and I think it is you know, a little bit better than average. And moving on to my next like, this has to do with the ride quality and suspension tuning. Now, this was something I mentioned in my first drive video, was that the ride quality and the frequency responsive dampers that Nissan has equipped this vehicle with are above average in terms of ride quality. And I can confirm, driving around town in my normal environment, that I have been very, very pleased and very satisfied with the ride quality, even with the large wheels and tires that this vehicle comes standard with here in its top platinum model. So when you combine the actual seat comfort with the frequency responsive damper tuning and just the overall setup that Nissan has chose with this vehicle, it's very comfortable. It borders on luxury. I would say it's probably as good as some luxury segment vehicles that this vehicle may kind of overlap or compete with. So if you're looking for something that's, you know, easy to ride with, comfortable, semi-luxurious, if not luxurious, this vehicle is certainly going to be the one for you. So, you know, definitely a comfortable, plush ride, probably much better than that of the previous generation Murano, which unfortunately I don't have any experience with. But overall, just note, very soft ride, very well controlled, well damped, still has a very good handling and overall chassis dynamic to it if you need to push it around corners, anything like that. So my next like actually has to do with the MyQ garage door opener integration here on the actual vehicle head unit itself. Now, of course, as you guys probably know by now, Google integration or Google built-in is found on this with wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, but there also is the MyQ garage integration, which allows you to control select garage door openers actually from the head unit itself. And as a MyQ user myself, I would absolutely love this feature if I were to integrate this with my personal garage door and actually own the vehicle, use this on a daily basis. I think it's just as good, if not better, than that of HomeLink services, which this vehicle is also equipped with up here on the dimming mirror. So whether or not you're using Garage HomeLink or the actual MyQ app on the infotainment system, I like that it's actually integrated into this vehicle and just create a more seamless you know, environment between your house and your car. Now, continuing on with some of the vehicle customization settings, and another item that they did touch on last month as part of the PowerPoint presentation is the walk-away lock and unlock functionality, which you can toggle here in the actual digital cluster itself. Now, this is a feature that not all manufacturers offer out there because it does require some additional proximity sensors in and around, I guess, the front door panels or the front door handles, or anywhere that you want to offer this, whether it be the trunk area, the front doors themselves, etc. It does add a little bit cost, a little bit of complexity, and a little bit of obviously additional sensors that can be integrated here on the two front doors themselves. But it was a feature that I turned on, actually wanted to experience using over the last week. And I actually like using the walk, or I guess the approach unlock function, but not necessarily the walk away lock, which you can toggle them independently, which I appreciate, because walking up to the car, having it unlock once you get within a couple feet of the door handle and just getting inside and going, is much nicer than that of using the proximity buttons on the outside of the door handle, which unfortunately this vehicle does not come equipped with the touch sensor door handles like some other vehicles or some of the competition where you can simply grab the handle and unlock. You have to use the button on the outside, which to me is kind of a downside of this vehicle at this price point. But luckily they did add the sensors on the front doors so you can simply walk up with your proximity key. The vehicle will be already unlocked at the point you're grabbing the handle, and you can simply get inside, use the start button, and go on your way. Standout feature, I actually appreciated and really enjoyed using the approach unlock, and I wish some other manufacturers would at least take a look if they are able to offer this technology with their current implementation of some of the proximity sensors, because I think it would be a very useful, handy feature to have across the board. So that's gonna do it here for all my list of likes with the 2025 Murano. Now let's get into things that I didn't love so much about it. Some of these were discovered up in Michigan on my very first drive, and other ones were added more recently over the last week with this vehicle. Now the first one, starting out on the exterior, has to do with the automatic high beam assist performance, specifically with the reaction time that it takes the system to go from high beam into low beam for oncoming drivers. Now I have no complaints with the LED projector headlights, both low and high beam, in their performance in terms of output. I think it's actually quite good, probably about average, if not just above average, and beam pattern, everything like that, I have no complaints. But when it comes to using the automatic high beam assist, I think it's actually extremely slow to react to oncoming drivers, and they almost have to be coming directly in front of the vehicle in the adjacent lane. Not really much of an angle or leeway there for the system to actually detect the headlights, go into the low beam, and then of course once they pass, resume the high beams. So I think Nissan could definitely work on tuning the high beam assist function, some of the software, maybe the hardware in terms of the cameras or the sensors that it's using to determine the lighting is coming at the vehicle. But I just think it's a little bit behind some of the other recent vehicles I've been in and their automatic high beam performance. Now my next two dislikes actually have to do with what's underneath the hood, and it might not be for the reason you're first assuming. Now my first dislike has to do with the throttle tuning, specifically the throttle tip-in with this 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. So up on my first drive, I didn't necessarily have an issue with the throttle tuning, the overall performance of this engine, and I still don't have an issue with the performance and the output figures from this very compression turbo engine from Nissan. But I do have an issue, or I found on this particular vehicle, with the throttle tip-in, specifically in the standard drive mode. It has a dead zone near the top of the pedal. The first maybe 10–15% of pedal travel, there is not a lot of output or reaction from the engine in that particular drive mode. Now flipping it into sport mode, of course, everything gets a little bit more sensitive, and it fixes almost all the complaints I have, with that throttle tip-in. If not, it's a little bit too aggressive. So essentially you'll be driving along, either from a stop or rolling at a certain speed, and just want to give it a little bit more throttle input, or just want to get going a little bit off the line. Well, you have to actually get past a little bit of a dead zone in the throttle itself to actually get the amount of output and the amount of, I guess, acceleration that one would expect from this engine. Now maybe some of that has to do with turbo lag with this engine, I'm not quite sure, but either there's a combination of variables there, or it's the throttle tuning specifically in the way the turbo is set up, that it's just not as reactive as I would like, specifically with light throttle application. Now my second dislike in regards to this powertrain setup, again, not something I noticed off, firsthand up in Detroit, but is the amount of NVH, specifically vibration, that comes through the engine mounts, some of the other, mounts and bushings that, Nissan has chosen for this vehicle into the actual cabin itself. Now I'll go ahead and insert a clip here. When I was waiting in a drive-through, had a water bottle sitting in the center console, and you can clearly see the water and the amount of vibration coming into the center console tunnel, also into the passenger or the seating area, just the whole vehicle in general. I was actually shocked by that because it was so much vibration at an idle RPM. Yes, it was cold outside, and I think it does have something to do with the ambient temperature, because here we are in a 52-degree day and I don't notice it nearly as much. but it reminded me of some older vehicles where that, just rattled the plastics and all of the interior would just start rattling because the frequency and the bushings and how Nissan or manufacturers in general chose to tune the vehicle. So I was a little bit disappointed in that there was that much vibration coming into the cabin at certain temperatures at idle with this particular vehicle. Yes, that has somewhat to do with the four-cylinder design. Four cylinders aren't the most refined in terms of their frequency, the idle, stuff like that. So hopefully that's something that they can iron out over, the course or the lifetime of this current generation, change bushings, tweak some things, maybe add them out or, just change the material, because that amount of NVH or just specifically vibration does not match the overall personality of this particular vehicle. Now, my fourth dislike with this vehicle has to do with the interior here, and specifically those are going to be the steering wheel buttons and controls. Now, believe it or not, this is actually something that Hyundai and Genesis changed in their vehicles over a certain model year, a couple model years ago, because they had nearly identically laid out and very similar types of controls, but they got consumer feedback that actually made them change them to individual buttons rather than the kind of plastic quadrant buttons that Nissan has decided to go with for the Murano. So essentially these are toggles and or kind of a scroll wheel over here in the middle, and then you have these buttons that are all backlit illuminated. So you have your volume, you have your set, cancel, Pro Pilot Assist, Adaptive Cruise, Lane Centering, and the distance markers over there. And then you have your audio multimedia. The phone call buttons will actually switch via the Seek track here at the bottom, which is pretty darn cool. And then you have a way to control the gauge cluster and then the infotainment system by pushing this button. It will change over there to some of the quick shortcut menus. These buttons, I would say, are not necessarily the most intuitive for one, because at first, even when I got in this vehicle earlier this week and up in Detroit, I didn't know that the set and cancel were actually like buttons you push right here. I thought they actually had to do with this button right here, which is just the cruise control speed adjustment toggle. And then over here you have the buttons that control the digital cluster, the infotainment screen, and then of course these are all quadrant style. The whole plastic piece moves when you hit one of these. The volume, for example, the whole thing moves. And just to me, it's not a very premium experience. And I would much rather see dedicated individual buttons over here rather than the quadrant style that they have ultimately went with here, and that some other manufacturers, as I mentioned, Hyundai and Genesis specifically, actually changed their button or their controls from this design, very similar to this, into individual buttons based on feedback they'd gotten. So that's something that kind of bothers me. I don't think they're the most intuitive, given these, the set and cancel are on the top and the bottom, and just the design of them in general. Now, speaking of controls, my next dislike has to do with the Prindle gear selection here in the center console. Specifically, the fact, I guess, that they're the push button type, but also the reactiveness of the actual transmission and kind of the buttons themselves. So Nissan has decided to go with the park, reverse, neutral, drive buttons here in the center console, and they've even put a little, hump here on the reverse to indicate that's the actual button it is. It actually makes feeling for reverse, park, and drive easier in the fact that they've differentiated the buttons, by that reverse there. I don't necessarily have an issue with them being push type gear selection. I know it frees up space here in the center console, versus the normal traditional type of shifter and even a rotary knob or something like that. But my main issue with it is occasionally when I'll get done driving, I'll pull in the driveway or pull in a parking spot, I'll hit park. There is a couple second delay from when the transmission in the actual vehicle goes from drive into park, and it's enough of a delay that concerns me at sometimes, because you'll take your foot off the brake and it's just barely grabbing park in time for the vehicle not to really move anywhere, because you're going from, drive into park, for example. So I can't really get it to go or show you guys here, because I guess you can kind of see it there in the going from reverse into drive. So there's reverse, park, and then you can see it takes just a second or two to engage that actual gear and light the P icon up, and that delay is kind of what concerns me. in that it's, you know, taking that long to engage that given gear. Now, I think my next and final dislike here with the Murano, specifically again on the interior, has to do with the relay clicking noise you hear with a lot of the buttons and controls here inside of the vehicle itself. So for example, there's a relay box or some sort of relay that is actuating behind this area and this set of controls here to the left of the console. And then there's another relay, I think, behind the HVAC controls, kind of in this direction, if you will. Maybe it's a little bit in the center console as well. But there's a number of functions and buttons that you can push here on the interior that you can audibly hear relays clicking, and I think it just takes away from the premium experience that one might expect when, you know, spending over $50,000 for a vehicle like this. So the first example I can show you guys is the heated steering wheel button here. Pushing this, you can hear just a very small click, and I won't be able to capture that on audio, unfortunately. It's somewhere kind of behind the steering wheel. And then turning on like the rear defroster, for example, again, just a very minor click, kind of like the heated steering wheel in this vicinity here. And there's like one or two other items that you can push here on the interior, or, you know, times where you hear the relays clicking. So I know this is a somewhat of a nitpicky item, but I know there's other manufacturers out there that kind of can isolate this noise a little bit better and where they've placed the relays, I guess, inside of the dashboard itself. So again, not a huge deal, not a deal breaker. But I think, to me, there's just enough times it's clicking at you, it just makes you feel a certain type of way, and it's not necessarily a luxurious premium sensation you get when those things are clicking behind the dashboard. And I guess just another honorable mention, which might be, you know, hopefully just an issue with this particular vehicle that I'm in, but the windshield washer fluid, I don't even hear the pump going. It's full. I checked it underneath the hood. So this entire week, unfortunately, we had some rain and some, you know, poor weather. I've not been able to use the windshield washer fluid because the washer pump, or something to do with the washer pump. Okay, so something I've noticed and had happen 2 days in a row now is the gauge or digital dashboard dimming is staying on the nighttime brightness versus going to the daylight brightness, even when the sun and, you know, ambient conditions, you know, should be more than enough to, you know, trip the sensor to brighten up the gauge cluster. And with sunglasses, I can actually barely see the tachometer area. And the one way that I determine you can fix this is simply by rotating the dial here, putting the lights off of auto and flipping them back into auto. And you can see it stays bright and everything is exactly how it should have been. Both of these occurred after a remote starts in my driveway, so I'm not sure if there's a software glitch or something like that, but definitely something that is quite annoying and shouldn't be happening. So I think that is going to do it here for my full list of both likes and dislikes here with the 2025 Nissan Murano Platinum. Now, I first off want to give a huge thanks to Nissan for sending this vehicle out for me to test and review and gain a more comprehensive, well-rounded opinion with this vehicle, because at the end of the day, an hour or two behind the wheel will give you a certain type of opinion and impression. But ultimately, living with this vehicle for 7 days in your, you know, normal environment, you know, might give you totally different impressions, both positive and negative, which I kind of detailed here inside of this video. But ultimately, this vehicle is still in a very unique position given its segment of a mid-size two-row SUV. There's basically no direct competitors outside of the luxury space at this point for this particular vehicle. Now, some of the competitors of the past would have been the Ford Edge. The Chevy Blazer is kind of an overlap for the 2025 model year, given you can still purchase that vehicle for the time being. But outside of that, you kind of got to start looking at vehicles such as the Hyundai Santa Fe, which is three-row. You have the Toyota Crown Signia, which is more of a wagon type of vehicle, certainly not an SUV by, you know, EPA classifications. So as this vehicle stands, I still have a very positive impression of it. And, you know, coming from someone that doesn't have a, you know, very well-versed background with Nissan, I think they did a pretty darn good job with a lot of attributes about this vehicle. The seats, the ride quality, the powertrain, the 2-liter turbo is very torquey, but there's other attributes that, you know, certainly if they could tweak a little bit more, dial in, specifically with that throttle tuning in the standard drive mode, isolating the 4-cylinder engine from the cabin, specifically when it's cold outside. A lot of those things would make this vehicle even better than it already is. Of course, the 4-wheel drive system, as we tested up there, does pretty darn good job in sending power to all 4 wheels. The design is what it is. I don't particularly love it. I don't hate it either. I absolutely love this exterior color, this champagne beige exterior. Love the fact that they offer a blue leather on certain color combinations and trim levels. And ultimately, you guys will have to let me know what you think of the new Murano down in the comment section below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my likes and dislikes on this list, or want to add your own. Feel free to do that. This is a great opportunity for prospective buyers to be, considering all of these things, whether they are a big deal to you or not a big deal, because, these are just my opinions and I totally understand that. But hopefully out there you guys understand at least where I'm coming from on these. And like I said, I want to give a huge thanks to Nissan for giving me this opportunity. Make sure you guys stay tuned to the channel and subscribe if you guys are interested in some of my other impressions on Nissan vehicles, because that will be coming here over the next couple weeks and couple months. So I am very excited for that. But anyways, I appreciate continued support here on the channel. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed and or found this video helpful. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I hope to see you guys in the next one.